Well, lads, what can I say about UFC Noche at the Sphere? Well, to be honest with you, it's a load of bollocks. The Sphere is the grand new attraction in the city of greed and excess in America, Las Vegas. And the event itself marks a big milestone for the UFC, a company owned by majority white people celebrating Mexican independence. Yeah, I know. But nothing speaks more to the UFC than making money off other people's cultures. We can see this happen all over the world. Currently, what's happening in the Middle East with the UFC as well, what happened in Russia, in Dagestan too, and what was happening in Brazil 20 years ago. UFC loves breaking into new markets to make as much money as possible. And I know what you're saying. Who's going to be headlining this event? Well, don't worry, guys. It's going to be two white guys. White trash from West Virginia in Sugar Sean O'Malley, and the white European, Merab Javalishvili. Yeah, this is the main event for UFC Noche at the Sphere, and I think it could have been a little bit better. We have Sugar Sean O'Malley, who's the uncharismatic but very good and interesting fighter, and we have Merab, the charismatic but boring wrestle boxer. I know. I think this fight between them being one of them being charismatic and the other being a good fighter should have us with an interesting fight and event. But I don't see it that way. I see Sugar Sean O'Malley being held down by Marab for 5 rounds while he fails takedowns and wrestle boxes him against the cage. But let's see how that goes. But don't worry, we do have something to celebrate Mexican independence. We have Alexa Grasso versus Valentina Shevchenko. No, this could be an interesting fight, but I see this going a lot of the ways the last fight went. I think Valentina Shevchenko does have a good chance of beating Alexa Grasso, but I could also see Alexa Grasso pulling it off with a split decision. I think it might go similar to last time in that we might have some jiggery pokery happening with the scorecards to help Grasso because, it's an event built around Mexican fighters in the sphere. She's a Mexican champion defending. If it's a close fight, well, I won't say any more than that. And as well as that, I could see it going that Shevchenko could die of dehydration during the fight. If her training methods are anything like the way she's going to face this title fight, it could be another thing to happen. And then we also have Brian Ortega and Diego Lopez. Now, this for me, I think, is the most interesting fight that's going to happen on the card. We have Brian Ortega, who cosplays wanting to be a Mexican gangster, and Diego Lopez, an actual badass who comes in and fights people even though fighters pull out at the last minute and he has to fight someone way heavier than him and then actually wins. I think the way this fight goes could go one of two ways. Brian Ortega could walk in and get hit with a dirty uppercut by Diego Lopez because he has terrible striking defense. Or I just see Diego Lopez kind of playing with him on the feet and then catching him when he's walking in. I think this could go two ways, but I definitely think that Diego Lopez is going to win. I think he's a more interesting fighter here because he's got very good jiu-jitsu, very good striking. One thing he has against him, he is probably one of the most terrible haircuts in the entire UFC, which is saying something because I think a lot of these guys do absolutely diabolical things to their hair. But I digress. If that hasn't got you interested, then I think our next fight will. It's Raul Roses Jr. versus cameraman number three. Yay. I know, guys. What can we really say? I actually quite like Raul Roses Jr. I think he's a nice kid. I think he's following his dream. But I think he's a little bit too young to be in the UFC. Like the UFC just keeps feeding him cans and needs to beat, which is understandable because he's very young and still early in his MMA career. But I really think he should have done this on the regional scene. It would have built his confidence more. I think the way he is now, he's too young in the UFC, that he mightn't reach his full potential because he's had too many fights that have done too much damage so far in his career. Because the way he's fighting now, I don't think he's going to remember his name when he's in his 30s. Well, at least people remember his catchphrase, I suppose. Meep meep. But let's move on and talk about some more stuff that's going to be come up in this card. And let's be real here. If you look at the rest of this card, outside of the fights I've just talked about, do you really care about anybody else? And don't get this off being like, oh, how don't you know Yasmin Haruge versus Kellen Souza or Irene Adalana versus Norman Dumont? Being like, these fights nobody cares about. And to be honest, it kind of speaks to the quality of the cards the UFC has been putting on this year. They started very strong in the first quarter this year, putting on some really, really good events. But for the last few months, it feels like the pay-per-view events and the god-forsaken fight nights have just been of really bad quality. Fights haven't been too interesting, and the events haven't been very memorable. Like even in the last event, I can't even think of too many memorable moments. And this kind of speaks crazy because when you look at the seat prices for what this event is charging, this is a quite mediocre card. I'd probably give this card a probably 4 out of 7, and they're trying to charge $2,000 for like not brilliant but decent seats at the Sphere. Like, who is this event actually for? Is this just for rich white people that want to watch Mexican fighters beat each other up for their entertainment? Because if they're doing this as a Mexican independent celebrating Mexican MMA, wouldn't they have these priced a little bit different? But I don't know if this is the fault of the UFC or of the people that run the Sphere. It's hard to say, but I don't see this event really selling out because we're about 2 weeks away from where the event is. And if we look here, there are still so many seats that haven't been sold. One, I think it's because the price of these seats is absolutely ridiculous. And two, there's no one really driving people to go to this event. We have Sugar Sean O'Malley, but I think this kind of proves, as well as with some of his other fights, that his star power isn't really there to get bums in seats. Sure, he can get a lot of views online, but these people aren't going to be paying to come see the event. And as well as that, if this was a stacked card, like what we had at UFC 300 or even UFC 299, which we had with Sugar Sean O'Malley as well, this could have sold out. But because you're relying on Sugar Sean to sell all these seats, and the rest of the fights are just kind of meh, bland, not too interesting, I don't see this event selling out. And to be honest with you, I don't think this is going to be a very successful event for the UFC because I imagine the price to run this event is going to be astronomical. And if you look at the fight fans that they're expecting Sean O'Malley to bring, it's just going to be guys aged between 15 to 23. And these guys don't really pay when it comes to watching these sports events. They find these events somewhere on the high seas. And I think this isn't going to really help because if the event doesn't sell out and the pay-per-view doesn't do very well, what can they really brag about? Oh, wow, look, we had the screen and everyone could see each other. But I don't think the UFC is going to make money on this. If anything, I think this is going to be the first event the UFC have done in a long time that's actually going to cost them money. But I don't know. Do you agree with me? Do you think this is going to be a very successful event? Or do you see it that me and a few other MMA YouTubers are seeing it as being kind of blah, mediocre, like the last few UFC cards? Let me know down below if you're interested. We'll have a discussion in the comments and see what you think. Anyway, let me know, like, subscribe, do all that stuff, or don't. I don't really care. Probably no one's going to watch this anyway.